was your impression? I remember you telling me when you first entered the building.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a call me Ishmael moment where, Rick was the center of this universe. And I remember feeling just so terrible, like pit in my stomach. Oh my gosh, I made this mistake. Are these guys going to fire me? And Rick actually pulled me aside and said,
from the mind that built Axon. In a galaxy where big ideas meet deep conversation, step into the unknown. This is Boldly Go.
Hey, welcome to episode 15. Today we have the epic story of a young man who joined a company called Taser when he was 25 as a project manager. Came in and told me I was full of shit and somehow rose in the matter of a few years to become president of the company and save our riskiest product and ultimately help transform the entire company. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Luke Larson.
Hey Rick, Luke. Mike, nice to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see you. So welcome to the Boldly Go podcast. So maybe we should just get started. Luke, how did you come to learn about Taser, the company, and tell me about, the first time you came to us and the beginning of the story?
So Taser was starting to get adopted by law enforcement. And the first time I saw Taser was actually at a modern day Marine show where Marines were lining up to get hit by the Taser. That was my first exposure to Taser. And a few years later, I was a Marine Corps infantry officer. I did 2 tours to Iraq. One of my dear friends had been killed in Fallujah in 2007. And in early 2008, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I wrote a memorial article for him. And the head of Taser Federal Marine, a guy named George Fenton, read it and said, you should come in and talk to us. And so I was just transitioning out of the Marine Corps, and I came in and met some of the Taser guys. And the first time I actually met you, Rick, you were kind of running to a meeting. It was on the stairs of the lobby, and heard about your vision for Taser and knew I wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah. What was your impression? I remember you telling me when you first entered the building. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a call me Ishmael moment where, Rick was the center of this universe in the lobby, and the entrance of Axon, or Taser at the time, you walk through the man trap and then you walk into the lobby of Taser. And when I joined, there was actually only probably like 100, 120, 150 front office people. And so it was a little bit cavernous. It actually wasn't totally filled out yet, but you could just feel the energy in the building.
You could feel Rick's presence when you walk into the building.
Had we started Axon Pro or not yet when you first started? What project did you work on first?
Well, the first project I worked on was actually called Shockwave, but it was a electronic claymore that you would set it down and it would shoot out like several Taser cartridges. And that was the first project that I was the project manager on for.
We did talk about Shockwave in the prior episode, and Luke, he did say that was one of his favorite products, just didn't take off commercially. Like, he was very proud of Shockwave.
Yeah, so when I was working on Shockwave, I didn't actually have a ton, I was a project manager and Rick is the CEO, so we weren't meeting daily or anything. But one of the first mistakes I made on Shockwave is I actually ordered the wrong case, and I ordered $60,000 of the wrong case. And I think that's about what I was making at the time. And we had to write it off. And I remember feeling just so terrible, like pit in my stomach. Oh my gosh, I made this mistake. Are these guys going to fire me? And Rick actually pulled me aside and said, hey, don't worry about it. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. And at my level, I make these big mistakes. The key is to learn from it and keep going. And I think, I definitely saw that from Rick time and time again.
But I want everybody to know, like, Luke is a project manager. That's an entry-level job. He didn't really have any decision-making authority. He would go talk to all the engineers, and his job was to take notes and then help organize everything so the engineers get their job done, and then figure out what the timelines were going to be based on, what everybody who had any sort of authority would tell him. And he's like, okay, take his notes and track it, which is what makes some of the things you did so extraordinary. Let's see, which came first? So let's put Shockwave in the rearview mirror. You then worked on Axon Pro. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you're supposed to be just putting together the timelines, and then one day you walked into my office, which is a cube. Everybody at Axon has it's a cubicle in an open floor space, same as everybody else. And I remember Luke coming into my and he says, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And I didn't know you very well at the time. And I said, "Sure." And he says, he sits down next to me, and he says, "I don't know if this is appropriate. This thing is unsalvageable." Luke, do you remember what else you told me that day, or what's your recollection of that moment?
Well, we had worked on Axon Pro for two and a half years and got this to market. And at the time, the iPhone in 2008, the iPhone hadn't taken off yet. It was like only rich people are going to have the iPhone. It's not going to be a ubiquitous computing platform you put in your pocket. And so we built our own Linux-based computer, the Axon Pro, and the BOM costs on this thing was astronomical. It was not quite $2,000, but just under $2,000. So for us to turn around and try to give this to law enforcement, the economics just didn't work. And the product, it was like, it was big, it was clunky, it was bulky. And so we had lost a lot of deals. I think we had only had won about a handful, maybe 18 or 20 deals. And it was just very clear this was not the right product. We had sold at the time, I think, just around $1 million of sales, and we had $3 million of inventory. And so I felt like we needed to have a come to Jesus and say, this is not the right approach. And so when I went and talked to you, Rick,
look what I found. I found a picture of the Axon Pro there. You could see it was this 3-part system where we had a head camera. We'd build our own touchscreen computer. That third thing is a interface to your radio. The engineering just spun totally out of control. It was a lot of that was my fault because I kept telling everybody, "Oh, we need this new feature, this new feature." The cable alone, the cable harness to connect these three things cost like $200. That was our cost, which means, if you have any kind of markup, we'd have to sell the cable for like $500. And I think, Luke, you said this was about as sexy as braces. Like people just didn't want to wear this.
Yeah, if you can look past not a very flattering picture of Rick up in the corner there, you see the head mount, and it didn't look cool. It was very bulky and heavy. And it's funny you talk about the cables. I remember meeting with the cable supplier, and he kind of pulled me aside and he said, you can buy these cables off the shelf for like $20. Why are you custom designing your cable? And so all of these little insights kind of led us to believe, hey, is there a way we could get to market faster with something leveraging more kind of commercial off-the-shelf technology, maybe even consumer technology? So we started to look at ways we could maybe, get to market faster, leveraging other technology.
So you had Taser Cam and that was the first iteration of trying to record what was happening. Is this the first body camera? Like the first real body camera?
Yes. This was our first attempt at it. Now, I want to take a quick sideline. Luke didn't send me this picture to show the camera. I pulled it up. I think Luke wanted to talk about the level of stress I and the company were under at the time, because this thing was failing miserably.
Yeah, I mean, in 2008, there was a global recession. If I recall, when I joined the company, the stock had been as high as like maybe 12 or 15, but then had crashed to like 4. And so there was a lot of, I think investors were not pleased that this, there was this big investment in this new program with kind of no light at the end of the tunnel. And you could definitely, feel the stress in the company. And I think, this picture, maybe one of the low points for you, Rick. You're a very dynamic guy, but this was definitely a tough time.
By the way, feel free. You don't have to hold back, Luke, just because we're recording. Luke occasionally sends me this to remind me of just the shitty shape I had fallen into. I'd stopped working out. I was not sleeping. The company, our shareholders were pissed off at us. the shareholders are saying, what are you doing? You're a weapon company. You're trying to make cameras. You've never done that. You're trying to make software. The sales are suck, basically. We had taken a very profitable taser business, and then basically we're spending all the profits. We went to a money losing or break even business because of this. So shareholders were unhappy, employees were unhappy, customers didn't like it. It was a miserable, shitty moment.
So when we were working on Axon Pro, that's actually, I think, when you and I started to really build a relationship and kind of trust and rapport. And we had, read this Jim Collins book, Good to Great, and he talks about a genius with a million helpers. And that was kind of Rick, is like, he's the genius with a million helpers. And that works to catch lightning in a bottle with the taser, which is an incredible success story. But around that time, I would say Taser wasn't really a great company. It had a great product, but it wasn't a great company. And, I kind of felt emboldened to tell Rick, hey, I think we should try to build a great company here. And that probably starts with, hiring great people and letting go of some of your responsibility and letting other people make decisions.
So Luke, when you came into my office or my cubicle that day to tell me that the Axon Pro was an unsalvageable disaster, you also came to me, though, with a plan, which is what impressed me so much. And so Luke walks in and he says, hey, tell you what, there's this company called Looksee that we found that was making a Bluetooth headset with a camera in it for consumers. And Luke says, I'm going to go cut a deal with them. We should just buy their camera. And then he says, we should go partner with Oakley. And actually, here's the outcome of that. Because I said, okay, let's do it, Luke. Set it up and I'll go with you. Let's go see if we could get Oakley to help us design this. And Luke, why did you pick Oakley?
So, when you're out talking with the customers, they would tell you, oh, we don't like the size, wires, the shape. And one thing that they wouldn't tell you is they didn't like the look of it. It didn't make them look cool. Remember that big headset kind of looked like a teenager wearing braces. And so, we started to look at, well, what are they wearing that they like to wear? And they really like to wear Oakley sunglasses. Facebook just did an announcement with Oakley. They're about 12 years behind Axon. So we lined up this trip to go see the CEO of Oakley and his design team. And as the junior guy on the team, I was like putting together the presentation. This is a really memorable trip for me because I had kind of been bird dogging it and setting up all these meetings. And I looked at our president at the time, Doug Clint, and I said, should we wear suits to this meeting? I'm like still got mud on my boots. I'm still learning how to be a business person. And Doug says, let's just wear polos. Like that's who we are at Axon. We wear, polos. Mm-hmm. And we show up to the Oakley building and those guys are wearing like flip-flops and board shorts. Another cool moment in that meeting was like 10 minutes before the meeting, I kind of jokingly said, hey, Rick, I'm the one that did all the work for this. I put together the deck. I've got this pitch. You should let me pitch it. And I was literally joking. I didn't think he was going to let me do it. And I wasn't really asking. I was just kind of being playful with him. And Rick says, you know what? That's a great idea. Why don't you pitch the deck? So in the meeting with Oakley, he said, we envision our camera with your sunglasses. Every cop in the world will wear these. We did a handshake deal with the CEO of Oakley. And then the designer, it was a really cool guy, Hans Moritz, that we ended up becoming friends with. And a few years ago, he joined as the head of R&D for us. So.
Yeah, Hans Moritz is now at Axon, runs all R&D. I want to come back to this. For those of you who can see, if you're watching on YouTube, best way to consume the podcast, got a picture there. Going from left to right, there's me, then Milan Sarovic, another epic personality. We'll tell his story someday, how he went from being a production line assembly guy to running engineering. Next to him is Doug Clint, the famous attorney who grew to be president. Mm-hmm. And then there's Luke, and that's at Oakley headquarters. That was a truly memorable day for me too. That was just amazing.
You must have loved the. I'm just looking at their building. I know how you are. You must have loved the entrance to their building behind you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we love the whole design aesthetic, and then you can see there's the early concept. I'll take our pictures up there of the what would become the Axon Flex that was designed to fit with the Oakley sunglasses, and then the camera pack. So we really simplified this thing. And looking back, like I'm really proud of Luke. And frankly, I love giving people a shot. It's like, hey, you had the courage to come and tell me this thing sucked, but you didn't just come complain. Luke brought me a solution, and so why do I need to steal the thunder? Hey, let's give this kid a shot. And he talked Oakley into the deal in the moment. Now, ultimately, Oakley had been bought by Luxottica, which is a big conglomerate. And by the time it got up to like the CEO of Luxottica, they basically were not comfortable. They're like, oh, Taser's controversial. That was the name of the company then. We don't know if we want to be associated with this. But Hans Moritz and the guys at Oakley felt so bad. They're like, look, we're getting told we can't do this. But you guys, we're just going to give you the designs. You can take all the work we did and just go do it on your own, which we did. And then we just bought Oakley glasses and we sold it together with the Axon Flex.
When Luke came to you, I mean, at the time, did you think that it was not going to be a viable product, or did you think that it was the best thing since sliced bread? Like, were you optimistic for the product? And Luke was like completely blindsided you with this?
No. I believed in the category, but look, I was so frustrated. Now, before this, we'd always been a one product company. We had the Taser. We had a couple engineers, and we were building different Taser weapons. When we decided to do cameras, unfortunately, we tried to do many things at once. Hey, we're going to build cameras, and we're going to build this shockwave, and we're going to do software, which we'd never done before. And I'd never managed large teams of engineers, which is just totally different. When you have two engineers, they just work together and things happen. When you have big teams, and they weren't communicating very well, that's how the reason the cables, our original target was the whole system should cost us like, I don't know, $150, and we should sell it to the customer for like $300 or $400. And by the time we got done, the whole thing, our cost was almost $2,000, and the cables alone was over $200. And the way that happened is we had gone out, and one team was designing the camera head, and another team was designing the hub, and another team was designing the computer. And then at the end, we're like, okay, we got to stitch it all together. Well, the way they designed it, we needed like 18 wires in the cable, which like nobody puts 18 wires in a cable. And then we had to shield it because it operates near a taser that generates like these EMP pulses. So we had to go put this custom shielding on it. And that's how this assembly, and then we had to design our own connectors, and we had to waterproof them. So when Luke came to me, I knew it was a disaster, but in terms of the execution, and it was unsalvageable. But it's funny how you just deny those things until somebody just throws it in your face. And in the moment, you're like, oh my God, this kid's right.
Going on this, the first half of my career was body cameras. I was the body camera guy. I was in the trenches trying to figure this out. And, I have three daughters that were born in 2008, 2011, and 2017. And each one of them, like I caught their early moments on an Axon body camera, which is pretty fun.
Wow.
But in probably 2013, so we'd been at this 5 years, we had a company meeting, and Rick goes to the company and does this poll, and he says, how many people in the company want to shut down Axon? And the number was like 97%. 97% of the company. And I'm looking around like, every single one of my coworkers wants to shut this thing down. And I went home and told my wife, maybe I should start looking for a job. Around this time, we brought in a really interesting consultant that Rick knew from college, a guy named Emil Michael. And, as he was talking to the teams, he said, what is wrong? What's going on here? And some of the people that were saying, shut it down, I think these were bigger company executives where they had run large organizations at bigger, great, Fortune 500 companies, but they'd never scaled anything from 0 to 1. And so it was actually a really cool moment I had with Emil Michael, where he said, hey, I don't think the problem is guys like Luke. I think the problem is you guys need to, learn from this, get closer to the customer, kind of refine your sales pitch. And, but I literally thought we might shut this thing down.
In July 2013, we have these company meetings, and this was a persistent theme. There was actually a civil war brewing inside the company where, there were a lot of people who were like, why are we doing this? The stock's down, like the customers don't like it. And we're hiring all these expensive new people because software engineers are not cheap, neither are software salespeople. And literally there's no revenue coming from it. So we get this question at the company meeting anonymously. This was the most upvoted question. When would we consider exiting the business? And so my answer, it's a little bit of fun with this. So I put up a picture of Cortez burning his ships. And I said, folks, I don't want to hear this again. We believe that cops are going to need video. And I think this was after we'd begun the pivot to Flex. So we were investing in that new version where I had growing confidence that we had a big hardware problem with the first gen. But I said, look, guys, we're never going back. Like, I need you to stop asking. I need everybody to commit to this because there is no going back. We're so deeply committed. We're going to stick with this until it works.
And so I think one of the key benefits of why it worked is we didn't just kind of copy and paste these playbooks from these bigger companies. We went out and we listened to the customer. And a lot of people that were on the front lines of that were candidates in our leadership development program. And so this program was to go out and recruit in, great college students fresh out of school and kind of throw them in the deep end of the pool and see how they could do.
Remember, we've got young Luke. He's a step above an intern in the early days, coming to me telling me this, this marquee product is a disaster. We got to go fix it. Around the same time, I think Luke noticed I appreciated him challenging my thinking. And so not long after that, I remember Luke coming to me and he said, hey, let's talk about Mr. X. I don't want to name him. I was an employee. And Luke says, why is that guy still here? He's cancerous. And the minute he said it, I was like, oh God, I know Luke's right. But look, Mr. X has been here for like 15 years. He's like family. We can't, he's got a little bit of a crunchy personality. And Luke is like, dude, like, we can't have people like that here. You got to fire him. Again, here I am, the CEO of the company with this young kid telling me, giving me life advice or how to run the company. And as he's saying that, I've got this pit in my stomach, like, oh my God, he's right. Like, we've got to up our game. And then, Luke, do you remember what you sent me to go look at for that? The HR deck?
The Netflix
company?
deck, I think.
Yep. So give us, what was the punchline of the Netflix deck that you explained to me and then had me go watch it?
That great teams are like sports teams where you've got to assess, do we have the right players on the field for the mission at hand? And, a great sports team doesn't keep the team around all the time. They go in and audit. And one of my favorite saying is, I think the New York Yankees general manager said, I feel pretty confident we're going to win this game because the players on our bus are better than the players on the other bus. And so I think around that time, we really started investing in bringing in, not only bringing in top talent, but really grooming top talent and creating Axon or Taser as a talent factory.
Yeah, that was, it was really true. I mean, I remember watching that Netflix, again, it was their internal company meeting on culture. And they said, look, we're not building a family. Families, you have crazy uncles and toxic people, and there's nothing you can do about it because they're family. But a pro sports team, like, you don't put up with any toxicity. But in fact, if you might be best friends with somebody who's really a great person, but it might be like, hey, you're just not the best quarterback anymore. I'm sorry, we're going to trade you out. And for me, that was just a transformative sort of realization that for years, I never fired anybody. I hated doing it. And Luke convinced me, he's like, hey, first we got to fire the toxic people. And then we've got to start replacing the people that are great people. They're just not as good at their job. If we can find better people, like think of this like building a pro sports team. And so, together we, Luke then began to rise. Shortly after that, he became vice president of marketing because he had salvaged the Axon piece. And that's when, Luke, you proposed to me the leadership development program. He came to me and said, hey, as part of upgrading our talent, we should just have a young bench where we hire really smart kids out of the best schools. And we rotate them around different areas so that they're not stuck in one job immediately. It's like a talent pipeline. We can figure out what they're good at and migrate them into a job, and it would be appealing to those kids because they get a chance to explore and learn what they like. And so that around, was it 2008 or 9, right, that we started the leadership development program?
Yeah, it was pretty early, and it was fun to see some of the early candidates come in and make an impact. One guy, Josh Isner, early leadership development. When he was still pretty junior, he kind of also was challenging some of the ideas about, hey, we've historically gone through distributors. I'm now a regional kind of sales manager, and I want to take my area direct. And he laid out a great case for it. And it was really controversial. I mean, this is one of the most heated, hot meetings I've ever been in. And it was really cool to be in an environment where, Rick allowed, I think, junior, bright employees to present ideas and then create this culture where, hey, seniority doesn't always equal decision-making rights. Like, let's let the best idea win.
Are we going to put up an unflattering picture of Josh Isner? Because I know we have quite a few of them from those early days.
I don't have those ready for today, but we will.
A couple of things. One, the sports team and family thing, it is just woven into the fabric of our culture today. And I remember being in my very first company meeting in April of 2017. And I think it was Josh, who's now our president, gave that same analogy that Luke did. And I was upset. I was like, wait, I want to be a part of a family. Everybody wants to belong. And I thought Axon, or it's Taser at the time, we just switched Axon. I thought it was a family. But that sports metaphor is what keeps us at the top of our game. And we still talk about that to this day.
Yeah. If I could go back and give my 23-year-old self advice from when I first started the company, it would be exactly this. You've got to think of it like a sports team. You've got to be somewhat ruthless about upgrading to have the best talent in every position. Because before, in that first, I'd say 15, 18 years, we attracted a lot of wonderful people. But in many cases, they weren't the best at their job. And we just sort of let it pass because they were hardworking, good, nice people. And then some of them started to get frustrated and kind of toxic, and we never took any corrective action. And so, but in 2008, if I'm candid, Taser was kind of a toxic mess. When Luke came in, and then when he started the leadership development program, a lot of the older previous employees who've been around for a while were throwing up on it. They're like, who are these kids with these gold-plated resumes? And there's just a lot of infighting. This is turning into a parade of horribles. The Boldly Go podcast where I tell you all the things I've screwed up along the way. Like this family thing led to just an incredibly toxic and political culture. And again, Luke was a guy who helped me see it. And ultimately, the other thing I learned is those early employees, we didn't encourage them to challenge thinking. Early on, I had this hubris where I was like, I'm the founder. I need to tell people what to do. And I just need people who will see my brilliance and go do what I tell them to. And that's what the culture was. People were like, okay, we're going to go do this. And Luke was really, I'd say, the first guy who started challenging me. And I found it really refreshing. And over a few years, we changed the culture to no, you can be an intern, a kid straight out of school. It doesn't matter. You can challenge anybody. Hierarchy and tenure doesn't matter anymore. It's who's got the best ideas.
And I think to this day, you can be in meetings with LDPs and you got these young kids who are 22, 23, 24 years old. And it is offsetting or off-putting to someone who's been in their career, say, call it 20 years plus. And but there is no hierarchy. That person who may be fresh out of college and is not constrained by all the things that someone's been in their job or their career for 20 plus years constrained. But we do it to this day. Those LDPs or any young person coming into the company, they could tell Rick anything. And that may be the next big thing that we're going to do.
So I want to say this: Luke Larson saved the Axon camera. Without you, Luke, you could have died. And I put up this picture of when we were on the cover of Bloomberg Business Week. But even
Wow.
bigger than saving that product, Luke is the guy who transformed the company from this family business with some fairly toxic people and habits and culture. And over the course of it was probably a 10-year ride. It was hard. We had to fire a lot of people. We had to hire new people. We had to have some really hard conversations and meetings with folks. And some of them turned it around. But Luke, I can't overstate the impact you had. Luke is the guy who led the transformation of the company that was Taser into the company that today is Axon.
Well, thank you, Rick. I mean, I felt like the water boy on the Chicago Bulls. It's a really fun experience for me. When you walk into the lobby of Axon, we talked about this, and when you walk in, you see the Taser, you see the body camera. We've got a little thing for evidence.com and some of the other products that are now successful. You think, man, Rick and the people here, they're geniuses. This is what success looks like. And that's not what success looks like at all. Actually, success is all the scars on your back that Rick was talking about. And so if you go up into the museum of Axon, which is kind of up on the third floor in the back facing the manufacturing team, you see this graveyard of failed products. And some of them are pretty ugly, like the Taser Club. Maybe you guys have talked about that. And I think it tells a bigger story, and that is this quote that Rick would beat into the company, which is the Charles Darwin quote. It's not the strongest or the smartest, it's the most adaptable to change and people that will persevere. And so as a young guy, in the face of this, Rick putting up quotes like, "We're burning the ships. I'm all in." At this point in his career, Rick had already made a ton of money. He's not a multimillionaire. He's made a lot of money. It'd be really easy for him to hang up his shoes and be on a beach somewhere. And he's in driving the company forward every day. And that was super inspiring.
One thing that's inspiring to me too, though, talking about adaptability, is those employees that were here pre-burned the ships, and then they adapted, and they're still here. There are a handful of them throughout the company, and I'm impressed by them that they were able to make that transition, because I know how hard it was as a company. I know that was a pivotal moment when you put the burning of the ships the metaphor out there, and to see some of those guys and gals still at the company, that's pretty impressive to me.
I do have to say, 2008, 9, 10, 11, these were really hard years. It was hard. But as the business started to turn around in 2014, we had this inflection point where we'd done it. We built a real business. We were solving a problem, and the company started to scale. And we had a lot of fun as well. Rick said, "Luke, why don't you take over marketing?" And we started to do these, really creative programs. And it created I think this really, hard does not mean bad. Hard can be purposeful, and hard doesn't have to be shitty. You can also have, fun while you're doing it. And I think of the first 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, these were hard and shitty. And then 14 and on, we were still working really hard, but it started to be, I think, more of kind of a fun, inspiring culture that everybody could participate in.
Yeah, I would actually say that I love that Darwin quote, but yeah, it really comes down to grit. Almost everything we did, we made a ton of mistakes. When I see somebody who starts a business and it's just, it's just an immediate success in a couple of years, I always think, they actually didn't get the benefit of what it's like to really grind through and appreciate, doing the really hard stuff. Like Taser, the first 2 products were failure. Our first 7 years were nothing but failure. Then it turned around and it was a massive success. And then we did the body cameras, and we basically descended back into another about 7 years of failure. 2008 through 15 was absolutely miserable. There was a civil war inside the company. People didn't believe, shareholders didn't believe. And there was just a small cadre of us who were like, we're going to make this happen. Now, I have to correct you on one thing, Luke. He said I didn't have to work. That's actually not entirely true. So, me and my dad and my brother, we all made a lot of money in 2003, 2004. But things got gnarly. In 2008, when the financial crisis hit, my dad, thank God this guy was a risk taker because he was investing in the company when I told him not to. But he took like $50 million out of Taser. He did very well. By 2008, he lost it all. And I don't mean
Wow.
metaphorically. I mean, he lost it all because he took all the money that he'd taken out of Taser and he put it into 3 pink sheet, pre-revenue, high-risk startup companies. And when the market crashed in 2008,
Ooh.
those all went to zero. And my dad was in the middle of building a house. So he was like, hey, Rick, I need to borrow some money. And of course, I was also building a house and my Taser stock goes down. And so he was in the middle of this. And I'm like, shit, like I've got to bail my dad out. Ultimately, I ended up supporting him for the rest of his life. Because of his love of risk, I found like he wasn't managing his money well for somebody his age, right? But he just loved risk. And without it, as he would often remind me, he's like, this company wouldn't exist if he didn't love risk.
Mhm.
But when you saw that picture of me earlier, all stressed out. Let me bring that one back up. It's just such a treasure. I was fighting for my financial survival in a company that was also trying to execute this strategic pivot that was failing miserably and losing money hand over fist. It sucked.
I'm glad you brought up your dad, Rick, because he wasn't involved in the company day to day when I was there. But as I started to take on more leadership, you connected us. Rick's dad is actually an incredible guy. He went to, he's a West Point grad. He actually had served in the Navy, enlisted as a submariner, went to West Point, and then also served in the Air Force. The only branch of the military he didn't serve in was the Marine Corps. But if you think Rick is a dynamic, charismatic guy, you should meet his dad. It's like Rick on steroids. He was just such a presence. And what I loved about Phil is he would shoot these, like if we had a positive press release or product launch or earnings call, he would send an email or stop in the office and give the team kudos. But if something went wrong, he would also tell us. And a few times there was a little clutter in the office, and he's like, "Hey, Luke, come on, like make sure this is a little tighter." And he was just a really, really awesome guy, and I think his inspiration, at Axon, through you taking these big bets, but then also, having enough gas in the tank where the company ultimately didn't die.
Yeah, that was those were some just amazing times, and I miss my dad so much. He funded the company at the beginning, and I bled him dry. Famously, I told him in 98, 99 not to put any more money in. And he said, it's too late. Like, the bank's going to take everything if we don't, right? And he leaned in, and that one, ultimately paid off, and we managed to save the company. But during that time, one of the things that really impressed me about my dad, so he did one startup in 1986. It was quite successful, and that's the one that funded Taser. He had 2 companies after that, and they both failed. And right as that failed was when he was running out of money. And so he came to join me at Taser. Now, a rational person looking at this would be like, I'm going to go in and fix this thing. Like, my son's launched 2 products that have failed. Like, I'm out of cash. He was over 60. Everything was on the line. And to my dad's credit, I remember him coming in and he said, hey, man, you're the CEO. I'm here to help. I'll advise you, but you're going to make the calls. And he was the chairman of the board. So, I did work for him, but he also was my VP of finance. And he went out to help try to raise money and scavenge everywhere we could. He ultimately found the banker that would take us public. But through that whole time, he never, stepped in. And it's so inspiring to look back at it. I don't know if I could have been that magnanimous to just say, hey, look, it's still your company, son. Even though if this fails, I'm done. I'm going to leave you in charge and just, support you through this. It was wild.
It's been a consistent theme through 15 episodes in the history of the company is the advice and the insight and the inspiration that your dad had on you and then the company. What was he saying during this whole burn the ships, Civil War transition from taser to body camera period? Like, what was his advice to you or insight while all this is going on?
I would say this was a time he was not as certain about what we were doing. He would give me the advice of like, hey, you've got to make the calls. But he was not, I don't think, inherently a big believer. He wasn't close enough to it. You know, he'd still come in the office. And yes, he was a presence to be reckoned with, but he never second guessed me or the decisions. But he wasn't like behind the scenes, like, oh, this camera thing is going to be great. It's going to work out. He's like, oh man, like this doesn't seem to be going well. Are you sure?
Yeah, but I think he just hit it. Like he didn't second guess you. Like he set you up. He'd already, I think we talked about this in episode 14. Like we should put together a compendium of all the advice and insights that Phil had throughout the history of the company. And I guess during this period, it is like, I'm not second guessing Rick. Like this is the decision the company's made based on folks like Luke, and see how it plays out.
One person that I think Phil had a connection with that carried on to Taser and then Axon was Doug Clint. And Doug Clint, had worked for Phil, and then he had actually come in and was Axon's lead general counsel and saved them Taser through a lot of the litigation. And Doug was a mentor of mine. He was president of the company when I was coming up, and just an incredible guy who's another figure whose presence looms large at Axon. Doug Clint, he would always say, we want to win, but we want to win right. And I just remember, his kind of steady hand on the wheel as we were going through these dark times. Doug Clint was a presence. He was kind of a senior elder statesman. And then when I transitioned to president, he actually stayed on as the company as general counsel, which is pretty wild if you think about it. This guy was president of the company. And then Rick says, oh, I'm going to hand I'd like to promote Luke, who is in his early 30s. And Doug was so supportive of me and was such a champion. It was really humbling to have somebody like that as a mentor that I learned a ton from.
Yeah, that was really incredible. I mean, think about it. How often does that happen where it's like, hey, I know you're president, but we need to begin planning for the future. And I need you to step down, but I want you to stay here and coach your successor, this rising star, Luke Larson. And again, just one more example of Doug Clint being an amazing human being.
So, Rick, as we were kind of doing the transition where you had informed me I was going to be president, you actually told me we were in Harrogate, UK, at like a castle, and the sun was setting, and you said, young Luke Skywalker, I'm Darth Vader. I want you to take over the reins and be president. And it was really surreal for me. I was just kind of in awe of the chance to have this responsibility and really wanted to do right by the company. And as part of that process, you were kind of showing me the ropes. We went and did these investor calls. A few months later, we were in New York City. It was really cool. We were out talking to investors, and Interstellar, the movie Interstellar, had come out, and Christopher Nolan had directed it. I mean, just incredible. And Rick and I are in the movie theater together watching this, and it's a late showing because we've been working all day. And there's this scene where Matthew McConaughey pulls up to like the NASA camp, and they tase him. And we look at each other and we're like, this is so awesome. And by this time, we were winning. We were winning at this point. The company was growing, and it was just a really cool life moment to be in with you, see that movie, have the taser shown. It was really, really special.
I remember that well in Harrogate when we were in the UK, and we're at this reception to this beautiful castle, and I had a little bit of champagne, and I knew I'd put together the plan previously to begin transitioning from Doug to Luke. We'll talk more about this maybe down the road. That was part of it. I was actually thinking about transitioning out of the company, so I wanted somebody young enough to have a lot of runway, but I hadn't planned to do it that night. And then I had a couple glasses of champagne, and the sun is setting. It's this beautiful thing, and so I was like, now is the moment. So I just grabbed Luke. I was like, hey man, like, I want you to be my successor. I want you to take over from Doug. And yeah, that was a powerful moment for me too.
I don't think, well, I know now, Luke does too, like sunsets you love sunsets. Like I did not understand how much you love sunsets until a few years ago. And I've been with you for many sunsets where you just happen to know where the sun is setting and the time that it's setting. But I did not know that's where you handed over the reins to Luke in the UK as the sun was setting when you guys were at this castle. That is pretty cool.
Well, speaking of the sun setting, I think this episode, we're probably out of time for this week. So let's go ahead and let's wrap it up. And then Luke, we'll continue another, in episode 16. So let's go, let's wrap up for today. I want to maybe end with picture again, celebrating my dad. What an amazing risk junkie. And thank God he was human being who made all this possible and went on to mentor, not just me, but Luke and Josh and so many other folks along the way. So any other closing thoughts, Mike, as we wrap down today?
Well, I don't know if you did this on purpose, but I think you also put this picture up because you look much healthier in this picture than the first picture we started the episode out. So no, I'm excited that that Luke came on the program. I'm sure we'll bring him back to continue to hear more of how he's influenced the company to this day. When he served not just project manager, but all through president. So, and he was the president when I started back in 2017.
All right. So that'll wrap it up for today. Luke, thanks for joining us on the show.